Hello, my name is Scarlett. I want to tell you about my journey, how I learned to speak English like a pro in 2025. I used to be nervous, quiet, and unsure. Now I speak clearly, confidently, and without fear. Welcome to my journey. My name is Scarlett, and today I can proudly say I speak English with confidence like a pro. But it wasn't always like that. My journey started with fear. A deep, silent kind of fear that kept me stuck for years. I remember the first time I tried to say something in English out loud. I was 12. My teacher asked me to read a sentence in front of the class. My heart beat so fast I thought everyone could hear it. My hands were shaking. My face turned red. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. People waited. The room was quiet. I finally said the sentence, but I said it wrong. The words came out slow, broken, and strange. I saw someone giggle. Not loudly, just a little, but I noticed. That moment stayed with me. From that day, I avoided speaking in English. I didn't raise my hand in class. I didn't read out loud. I told myself, I'm not ready yet. I'll speak when I'm better. But the truth is, I never felt ready. Even after studying for years, learning grammar and memorizing vocabulary, I still didn't speak. I thought I needed to be perfect first. I waited and waited, but perfection never came. Then something happened that changed everything. One day, in college, I joined a new English class. The teacher was different. Her name was Miss Walker. She had short blonde hair and a very friendly smile. On the first day, she asked everyone to stand and say something about themselves. My heart dropped. I wanted to disappear. When it was my turn, I said, "My name is Scarlett. I like music." That was it. Just 6 words. But I felt like I had run a marathon. Miss Walker smiled and said, "Wonderful, Scarlett. Thank you for sharing." She didn't correct me. She didn't laugh. She didn't rush me. That simple kindness stayed in my heart. At the end of class, she said something I'll never forget. If you're waiting to speak until you're perfect, you'll never speak. Speak badly if you must, but speak. That one sentence hit me like lightning. That night I thought about what she said. I sat on my bed, holding my English notebook, flipping through pages of words I had written but never spoken. I whispered them out loud, very softly, afraid someone might hear. I repeated one sentence again and again. I want to learn. I want to speak. The words sounded strange at first, but little by little, they started to feel like mine. The next day, I made a decision. I would stop hiding. I would speak, even if it wasn't perfect, even if I made mistakes. So I started small. I went to a cafe and ordered coffee in English. I said, "1 small coffee, please." My voice was shaking, but the barista smiled and said, "Sure." That moment gave me a tiny spark of confidence. I walked out holding my coffee like it was a trophy. After that, I began to speak more in class. I forced myself to answer 1 question each day. Sometimes I said the wrong word. Sometimes I used the wrong tense. Once I said, "I am go to the store," and someone corrected me. "I am going to the store." I smiled and said, "Thank you." Because now, every mistake felt like a step forward. Still, not every day was easy. One day, I tried to explain something in a group discussion. I couldn't find the right words. I paused too much. I could see the others getting impatient. That night, I cried in my room. I felt small again. like that little girl in school who couldn't speak. But then I remembered Miss Walker's words. Speak badly if you must, but speak. The next day, I tried again. I realized that mistakes weren't the enemy. Silence was. Mistakes helped me see what I needed to learn. Mistakes showed me that I was trying. I started to see mistakes as teachers, not failures. Every time I used the wrong word, I learned the right one. Every time I was corrected, I grew. One time, I was in a bookstore looking for an English novel. I couldn't find it, so I asked the staff, "Excuse me, do you have this book?" and showed her the title. She replied, "Yes, we do. Come with me." We walked through the aisles together, and we chatted for a few minutes. I told her I was learning English. She smiled and said, "Well, you're doing great. Keep going." That sentence made my day. Every small win made me want to try more. I started leaving voice notes for myself in English. I talked to myself in the mirror. I recorded short videos explaining my day, like, "Today I went to the market. I bought apples. It was sunny." They were simple, but they mattered. I was finally using the language, not just studying it. One afternoon, I was walking home from school when I saw a tourist looking lost. She had a map and looked confused. I walked over and asked, "Can I help you?" She smiled and said, "Yes, thank you. I'm trying to find the museum." I gave her directions in English. She thanked me, and we talked for a few minutes. I couldn't believe it. I had just helped someone in English. Later that night, I smiled to myself and whispered, "You did it, Scarlett. You really spoke English." From that day forward, I started feeling like an English speaker, not just a learner. My fear didn't disappear overnight, but it became smaller. Every time I chose to speak, my fear lost a little power. Something changed deep inside me. I realized that courage doesn't mean you're not scared. Courage means speaking even when you are scared. Every word I said, no matter how small, made me stronger, and so I kept speaking. At the supermarket, on the bus, in school, with friends, with strangers. Slowly, I built my voice. I built my courage. And little by little, I began to speak like a pro. But there was still something missing. I wanted to grow faster. I didn't want to wait for English class or short conversations with strangers. I wanted English to be part of my world, not just something I practiced, but something I lived. I wanted to hear it, speak it, think it, and feel it all around me. And that is when I made another big change. That's how I moved to the next step in my journey. After I stopped being afraid of making mistakes, something inside me changed forever. I was no longer the girl who stayed quiet in class or whispered English words only when no one was around. I had learned to open my mouth and speak, even when I was nervous, even when my words came out a little messy. That was a big step for me, but soon I realized that just speaking once in a while wasn't enough. I still felt slow when trying to form sentences. I still paused too long, searching for the right words in my head. I still felt like English wasn't part of me. It was something outside of me, like a coat I wore sometimes, but not a second skin. So I sat down one afternoon at my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote a question. How can I live in English, not just learn it? I looked at those words for a long time. I didn't have the answer right away. But slowly, it started to come to me. If I wanted to speak like a pro, I needed to do more than just practice during English class or once a week with a friend. I Had to build a life around English. I had to make English my world, and so I did. The first thing I did was change the language on my phone. That may sound like a small thing, but it made a big difference. Suddenly, everything I did on my phone, checking, messages, setting an alarm, browsing apps, was in English. At first, I got confused. I didn't know what some buttons meant. But instead of switching back to my own language, I looked up the meanings. Bit by bit, those new words started to feel normal. Settings, notifications, storage, battery saver. I began to use these words without even thinking. Then I did the same thing with my computer. I changed the language to English. Now, every time I used Google, every time I opened a file, every time I watched a video, I was reading English. Next, I made another small but powerful change. I started writing my to-do lists in English. Instead of writing, "go to the store," in my native language, I wrote, "buy groceries." Instead of "finish homework," I wrote, "complete assignment." It wasn't perfect at first, but it helped me connect English with my real life. These were my real plans, my real thoughts, my real world. And now, English was a part of it. Then I moved to something bigger. I began keeping a daily journal in English. Every night before bed, I wrote about my day. Sometimes it was just a few lines. Other times, I wrote a full page. Today, I had a busy day. I went to class. I met my friend Olivia. We talked about movies. I felt tired but also happy. These small entries became my habit. My thoughts, my feelings, my stories, all in English. It was like I was talking to myself, but on paper. It helped me trust my voice. After that, I turned to what I loved most: music. I had always loved music, but now I started listening to English songs every day. I didn't just enjoy the tune. I printed out the lyrics, followed along, and sang out loud. I sang in the shower, while doing dishes, while walking. I remember singing "1,000 Years" by Christina Perri for the first time, trying to pronounce every word right. Singing helped me feel the rhythm of English. It helped me learn how words flowed, how sentences rose and fell. Movies were next. I began watching English movies and shows with subtitles. At first, I used English subtitles. That helped me connect the sound of the words to their spelling. I watched shows like Friends, The Good Place, and Modern Family. These shows were full of real conversations, jokes, questions, daily talk. I didn't understand everything at first, but I picked up so much without even realizing it. Words like kinda, gonna, wanna. I learned how people actually speak, not just how textbooks teach. But I didn't stop there. I also watched the news in English. I started with short clips. I didn't understand every word, but I got the main ideas. Over time, I got used to different accents: British, American, Australian. My ears became stronger. I could listen longer without feeling tired. Reading became a daily habit too. I read children's books at first, books with simple language and pictures. Then I moved on to young adult novels. I found a book called Wonder by R.J. Palacio. The language was simple but beautiful. I cried reading it. It wasn't just English, it was emotion, it was humanity, it was life. That book made me fall in love with reading in English. Soon after, I began following English-speaking creators online. I subscribed to YouTube channels about cooking, travel, learning, and fashion. I followed Instagram pages that shared word of the day posts. My social media became my English classroom. I was learning new words and phrases without even trying. And speaking of learning, I made a rule for myself. Every new word I heard or read, I would write it down in a small notebook. I kept in my bag. I called it my word book. I didn't just write the word, I wrote a sentence with it. If I learned the word excited, I wrote, I'm excited for the weekend. I didn't want to memorize words. I wanted to use them. I reviewed that notebook on the bus, at lunch, or whenever I had free time. Soon, I wanted more real practice. So I started talking to myself out loud, in English. Yes, it felt strange at first, but it worked. I described what I was doing. Now I'm brushing my teeth. I'm packing my bag. I'm going to the store. These small sentences helped me think in English. I was building my brain's connection to the language. I was training my mind to stop translating from my native language and just speak. Then, something amazing happened. One afternoon, while walking home, I passed two tourists looking at a map. One of them said, I think it's that way. But she sounded unsure. I stopped and asked, Do you need help? She looked relieved. Yes, we're trying to find the library. I smiled and said, It's just 2 blocks ahead. Go straight and turn left. She thanked me. Her friend smiled and said, Your English is really good. I almost cried. I had helped someone in English, not in class, not in a test, in real life. That moment made me realize I wasn't just learning English anymore. I was living in it. English was now part of my everyday world. It wasn't just in books or school. It was in my phone, my music, my thoughts, my plans, my conversations. It was everywhere I looked, and you know what? That changed everything. I started dreaming in English. I started thinking in English. I began to answer questions in my head in English without even noticing. And when I spoke, the words came out faster, smoother, more natural. It wasn't magic. It was practice. But not the kind of practice that feels like work. It was daily living. It was joy. My confidence grew. My fear shrank. And one day, while writing in my journal, I paused and looked at the page. It was full of thoughts, emotions, stories, all in English. I smiled and whispered to myself, Scarlett, you did it. You're doing it. But my journey didn't stop there. Living in English gave me confidence, but I wanted something more. I wanted to connect with people, real people. Not just shows or books or videos. I wanted to use English in conversations, in laughter, in friendships. That's when I decided to do something bold. Living in English had changed me. I could feel it every day. I was no longer just learning the language. I was thinking in it, singing in it, reading it, writing in it. English wasn't a subject anymore. It had become part of who I was. But even after all this, I still felt one thing missing. I could understand English better. I could speak to myself and write in my journal. But when it came to talking with real people, I still felt a little nervous. I wondered, what if I didn't understand them? What if they didn't understand me? What if I froze in the middle of a sentence? And then I realized something important. I could not become fluent by living only inside my own bubble. I needed real conversations, real people, real experiences. So, I made a promise to myself that month. Scarlett, you're going to speak English with real people, even if your hands shake. That promise scared me, but I kept it. My first step was simple. I joined an online group for English learners. I found a free conversation club that met every week on Zoom. At first, I didn't even turn on my camera. I just listened. I watched their faces and heard their words. Some spoke fast, some had strong accents, but they were all trying, just like me. That gave me courage. The second week, I joined again. This time I said hi when it was my turn. My voice was quiet, and my heart was racing. But I did it, and the person on the other side smiled and said, "Nice to meet you, Scarlett." Those 5 words warmed my heart. I smiled back. Week after week, I showed up. I didn't speak perfectly. Sometimes I paused. Sometimes I forgot a word. But nobody laughed. They waited. They helped. They supported me. One man from Brazil would always say, "Take your time. We're listening." That kindness gave me strength. I started speaking more, introducing myself, sharing ideas, asking questions. One week, the topic was hobbies. I said, "I like writing in my journal every night." A girl from Turkey said, "Oh, me too." We both laughed. That tiny connection, one sentence, one laugh, made me feel like I belonged. After that, I became braver. I wanted more. So I downloaded a language exchange app where people around the world could talk to each other. You teach someone your language, and they help you with theirs. I matched with a college student from Chicago named Mia. She wanted to learn a few words in my language, and I wanted to speak English with a native speaker. I remember our first video call. I was so nervous my hands were sweating, but Mia was friendly and relaxed. She said, "Let's just talk like friends, okay?" And that's what we did. We talked about food, school, music, pets. She loved iced coffee. I liked hot tea. She liked dancing. I liked drawing. We didn't have everything in common, but it didn't matter. We were 2 girls from different parts of the world, laughing and learning together. The best part? She didn't correct every mistake I made. She just talked, and that helped me feel safe. After the call, I smiled for an hour. I had spoken to a real American girl for 30 minutes, in English, and I didn't melt or explode or die of shame. In fact, I felt alive. That one conversation opened a new door. I started saying yes to more calls. I practiced with people from Canada, England, Australia. Each person had a different voice, a different style. Some spoke fast. Some used slang. Some were hard to understand at first, but slowly my ears adjusted. My tongue followed. And then came my biggest test, speaking English in public. It happened in a small cafe not far from my house. A group of travelers was sitting nearby. I heard them speaking in English about how they couldn't find the nearest bus station. I could have stayed quiet. I could have let them figure it out. But I remembered the promise I made. So I stood up, walked over and said, "Hi, do you need help finding the bus station?" Their faces lit up. One of them said, "Yes, please. That would be great." And just like that, I was helping them, giving directions, answering questions, smiling. They thanked me and said my English was really good. I said, "Thank you. I've been practicing a lot." When I walked back to my table, my hands were shaking. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from joy. That small moment showed me the truth. I could speak with real people. I was speaking with real people. So I took it further. I volunteered at a local community center that helped tourists. I met people from all over the world, asking for help, sharing stories, trying new food. I listened. I talked. I learned. Every day I spoke English, not in a classroom but in real life. One afternoon, I helped a woman from Texas who had lost her phone. She was upset, and I stayed with her until we found it. We talked the whole time. She told me about her hometown, and I shared a little about mine. At the end, she said, "Thank you, Scarlett. You have a warm heart and a beautiful way of speaking." That compliment made me cry later that night. Not because I wanted praise, but because it was real. My English wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was human. It was me. From that point on, I no longer looked for perfect grammar. I looked for connection. I didn't count how many words I knew. I counted how many people I could speak to, how many moments I could share. And with each conversation, I grew. I started asking deeper questions. What's something that makes you happy? What's the most beautiful place you've visited? What does home mean to you? And guess what? People answered. They opened their hearts. And I understood them. Not just the words, but the feelings behind them. I had become more than an English learner. I had become an English speaker. I still made mistakes sometimes. I still said the wrong word or got stuck. But now, I didn't panic. I smiled and tried again. And that made all the difference, because confidence doesn't come from speaking perfectly. Confidence comes from speaking anyway, and every real conversation made me stronger. But even though I was speaking more and more, there was something else. I needed to learn, something that would take my English to a whole new level. And I was about to discover it. After spending weeks talking to real people, something beautiful started happening. My confidence was no longer something I had to force. It started to grow naturally, like a plant soaking up sunlight. I didn't need to push myself as hard just to start a conversation. I found myself smiling when someone said hello in English. I was no longer scared. I was excited. But even though I was speaking more, something inside me still whispered, "Scarlett, you're not using big words. You still speak so simply. Are you really improving?" That thought bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I began comparing myself with others in the conversation clubs. Some people used long, complicated words. Some spoke quickly, with so many expressions I didn't even understand. I started thinking maybe I was behind. Maybe I wasn't growing fast enough. One evening, during an online chat, someone said, "The infrastructure of education systems should be reconstructed to match contemporary needs." I froze. My mind raced. Infrastructure? Contemporary needs? I didn't know how to join that part of the conversation. My English felt small next to that person's. That night, I stared at my ceiling for a long time. I almost cried. All my progress suddenly felt tiny. I whispered to myself, "Scarlett, you can barely say structure, and they're talking about reconstructing systems. What are you doing?" But the next morning, something changed. I was scrolling through a video where a well-known English coach said something that shook me awake. He said, "Simple English is powerful English. Clarity matters more than complexity." I paused the video, rewound, listened again. That sentence became a turning point for me. I realized I didn't need to impress people with big words. I just needed to connect. That day, I wrote one sentence in my journal that became my new rule. Speak simply. Speak every day. From that moment on, I let go of trying to sound smart. I focused on being clear. I told myself, it's better to say, "I feel happy today," than to say, "I am experiencing elevated emotional satisfaction." And something magical happened. When I stopped trying to speak like a textbook, I started sounding more like a real person. I began building a small personal vocabulary bank, not full of big, complex words, but filled with useful everyday words. Words like tired, excited, forget, remember, hungry, friend, idea. These were words I could use in any conversation, and I made it my mission to use them. Every day, no matter what, I would speak in English. Some days I recorded short voice messages to my language partner, Mia. I'd say things like, "Today I woke up late. I missed my bus. I ran to school. It was crazy." She'd reply, "I had a crazy morning too. My coffee spilled all over my shirt." That small exchange made me feel alive. I wasn't writing an essay. I was just being me, in English. Other days, I'd talk to myself in the mirror. I'd look into my eyes and say, "Okay, Scarlett, what did you do today? Let's talk about it." Then I'd tell myself a little story. "I went to the park. I saw a little dog. It was so cute. I wanted to pet it, but it ran away." It sounds silly, I know. But talking to myself like that made English feel less like a subject and more like my second skin. There were also days when I spoke to strangers. I started greeting workers at the local coffee shop in English. I'd say, "Hi, how are you today?" And they would smile and answer. Sometimes we had short chats about the weather, the coffee, or weekend plans. I remember one rainy afternoon, I asked the girl at the counter, "Do you like rainy days?" She said, "Only when I can stay in bed and watch movies." I laughed and said, "Same here." That tiny moment felt huge. It wasn't about big vocabulary. It was about being human. Every time I used simple English, I felt stronger. And the more I spoke, the more natural it became. Of course, not every day was easy. Some days I felt tired. Some days I didn't feel like talking at all. But I kept my promise. Speak every day. Even if it was just 5 minutes. Even if it was just one sentence. I started a new routine. Right after brushing my teeth, I'd look in the mirror and say one thing in English. "Scarlett, today will be a good day." "Scarlett, you did your best yesterday." "Scarlett, keep going." And those words mattered. They weren't just practice. They were love letters to myself. Sometimes I recorded myself reading out, loud from children's books. The simple words helped me feel safe. I would pause, repeat, and read with emotion. Little by little, my pronunciation improved. I sounded less like a robot, more like a person. Soon, I began noticing something else. People started saying, "You sound so clear." Not, "You use big words," but, "You're easy to understand." That became my favorite compliment, because clarity builds connection. And connection is the whole reason we learn to speak. I also realized that simple language made people feel comfortable. When I spoke slowly and clearly, the person in front of me relaxed. They didn't feel judged. They didn't feel confused. They felt like they could talk to me. That's when I discovered the true power of speaking simply. It wasn't about being less smart. It was about being more real. At school, I helped a few younger students who were just starting their English journey. They asked me how I spoke so confidently. I said, "I speak every day. I make it simple, and I enjoy it." They looked surprised. "That's it?" "Yes," I smiled. "That's it." They expected a secret trick, but there was none. Because the truth is, consistency beats complexity. Simplicity beats perfection. Daily speaking beats monthly studying. Even on hard days, I kept going. I'd whisper to myself at the bus stop. I'd think in English while brushing my hair. I'd make short comments like, "This is nice," or "I don't like that," or "Let's try again." These little habits turned my brain into a thinking machine in English. I even started dreaming in English. The first time it happened, I woke up smiling. My dream was strange. I was on a boat, talking to a cat in a hat, but it was all in English, and that meant my brain was truly learning. But here's something even more surprising. The more I used simple words, the more I understood complicated things. Why? Because I wasn't focused on fancy language. I was focused on ideas. I could listen to a podcast, understand the story, and retell it in my own words. I could read a short article, pick the main idea, and talk about it. I could hear a song and explain what it meant to me. Because I wasn't just repeating words, I was expressing thoughts. And English stopped being a mountain I had to climb. It became a path I walked every day with joy. One day, Mia said something to me that I'll never forget. She said, "Scarlett, when we first talked, you were shy and used short sentences. Now you tell stories, you joke, you explain your thoughts. You've grown so much." I smiled and said, "It's because I stopped worrying about being perfect. I just kept speaking." And that's the truth. If I had waited until I knew perfect grammar or long words, I would still be silent. But I chose to use what I had. Every day. Now looking back, I see that the real key wasn't big words or long sentences. It was my small, simple sentences that I used every single day that changed everything. So if you're on this journey too, let me tell you what I told myself. Use simple words, but use them every day. Even one sentence can open a door. Even 5 minutes can build a bridge. Even one small word, spoken with heart, can make you shine. And as I kept shining in my small way, something else happened. Something that changed my English forever. I used to think English was just a skill, something you practice, like math or piano. But somewhere along the way, between the mirror talks and the daily conversations, I realized something deeper. Speaking English isn't only about your mouth. It's also about your mind. Yes, I was speaking every day. Yes, I had made English part of my life. Yes, I had stopped fearing mistakes. But still, something inside me sometimes held back. Something quiet but strong. It was like a whisper in my chest. "Scarlett, are you really good enough?" I remember one specific afternoon when that whisper became louder than ever. I had joined a group discussion online. A mix of learners and native speakers were chatting about favorite childhood memories. I listened to everyone share warm, happy stories, some with perfect grammar, beautiful vocabulary, clear accents. Then, it was my turn. I opened my mouth. I wanted to say something funny about how my little brother once put peanut butter in my shoes because he thought it would make me run faster. It was a silly, harmless story. I had practiced how to say it earlier that day, but as soon as everyone looked at me, waiting, listening, my heart started pounding. My mouth went dry. Suddenly, I didn't remember the words. Suddenly, I didn't know how to say peanut butter. Suddenly, I felt small. I stumbled. When I was, my brother, shoes, my voice cracked. Someone smiled politely. Another person looked at their phone, and I wanted to disappear. After the call, I slammed my laptop shut and buried my face in a pillow. I didn't cry, but I felt so close. How can I practice every single day and still freeze like that? I asked myself, what's wrong with me? But that night, something shifted. I sat on the floor of my room with a notebook in my lap. I wrote a question on the first page. Why am I still scared? And the answer came like a slow sunrise. Because I still didn't believe in myself. I believed in English. I believed in practice. But I didn't believe in me. I thought others were better, smarter, more natural. I thought if I didn't sound perfect, I wasn't good enough. I thought every mistake meant I had failed. That was the problem. It wasn't about English anymore. It was about mindset. I closed my eyes and remembered how far I'd come. There was a time when I couldn't say even one sentence. There was a time when I would hide at the back of the classroom. There was a time when I thought English belonged only to smart people. But now I could speak. I could write. I could understand. Yes, I still made mistakes. Yes, sometimes I forgot words. But I kept showing up. I kept learning. I kept growing. That had to count for something, right? So I decided to make a new promise to myself. Scarlett, from now on, you are not only going to learn English, you are going to believe that you deserve to speak it. That night I did something strange. I stood in front of my mirror and said out loud, I belong here. I have a voice. I can speak English. I'm allowed to take my time. I am proud of my journey. The first time I said it, I felt silly. My voice was soft, unsure. But I repeated it again, and again, and again. By the 10th time, my voice was strong. I smiled, a real smile. Not because I was perfect, but because I finally accepted that I didn't have to be. From that moment on, everything began to change. The next time I joined a group conversation, I reminded myself, you're not here to impress. You're here to connect. I spoke slowly. I used my simple words. And when I messed up, I laughed. I meant peanut butter, not pizza butter. People laughed too. Not in a mean way. In a warm way. And just like that, I became human again. Started forgiving myself. Before, I would replay every mistake in my head for days. Now, I would pause and say, it's okay. You're learning. Be kind to yourself. I also began noticing something strange. The more I believed in myself, the more others listened. People leaned in when I spoke. They smiled more. They responded with interest, not because I used fancy words. Not because I was fluent like a native, but because I believed in what I was saying. Confidence is quiet but powerful. It doesn't shout. It doesn't show off. It simply says, I am enough. Every time I had a conversation, I reminded myself, be present, don't judge yourself. If I forgot a word, I didn't panic. I just used another word or described what I meant. One time, I forgot the word microwave while talking to a friend. I said, that machine that heats food fast. She laughed and said, oh, the microwave? I laughed too. Yes, that one. That moment taught me something important. Communication is about creativity, not perfection. I stopped waiting to feel ready. I stopped comparing myself. I started celebrating progress. One sentence spoken with heart was now worth more than 100 words never said. I changed the way I saw my mistakes. Before, a mistake felt like a failure. Now, a mistake felt like a step forward. Because each mistake meant I was trying. Each try meant I was growing. Each growth meant I was becoming the English speaker I dreamed of. I also stopped seeing native speakers as better than me. I started seeing them as people with different journeys. One day I asked my English teacher, who had grown up in Chicago, "Do you ever make mistakes when speaking?" She laughed and said, "All the time." That made me laugh too. Even native speakers make mistakes, I thought. Why should I be afraid? That was when I fully understood. Fluency is not perfection. It's courage. Now, every time I speak English, I don't just use my voice. I use my belief. I carry a quiet fire inside me that says, "You are enough, Scarlett. Keep going." When someone interrupts me, I don't stop. When I hear big words, I don't shrink. When I forget something, I smile and move on, because I've trained my mind to be my teammate, not my enemy. And that mindset has carried me through the toughest days. The slow days, the messy days, the days when my English felt broken. I remind myself, broken is still brave, slow is still strong, trying is still winning. That's the difference a mindset makes. Now, when I help new learners, I don't just teach them vocabulary or grammar. I tell them, believe in your voice, trust your journey, don't wait for perfect, just speak. You are enough. Because that's what changed everything for me. And you know what? The girl who once hid at the back of the classroom now raises her hand to speak. The girl who once shook during conversations now leads them. The girl who once doubted herself now encourages others. And I did all that not by becoming someone else, but by finally believing in who I already was. Looking back, I realized that my journey to speaking English like a pro wasn't about magic or talent. It was about courage, persistence, and the small choices I made every day. I was not born confident, and I certainly didn't start speaking English perfectly. There were moments when I wanted to give up because I felt embarrassed or stuck. But I learned that mistakes don't mean failure. They mean progress. Every time I stumbled over a word or forgot how to say something, I reminded myself that it was all part of learning. Instead of hiding, I chose to keep trying, and that made all the difference. I brought English into my everyday life, whether through listening to songs, watching shows, or thinking in English while I went about my day. This helped me grow slowly, but surely. I also found real people to practice with, friends, language partners, and even strangers online, and that made me braver and more natural. I didn't wait until I was ready or until I had a perfect vocabulary. I started speaking with simple words and built from there. Most importantly, I changed how I thought about myself. I stopped calling myself bad at English and started believing I could improve. That belief fueled my actions, and day by day, I became the speaker I am today. If I can do it, so can you. It's not about perfection. It's about starting where you are and moving forward. Your voice is powerful, and the world is waiting to hear it. Here are some simple tips I want to share with you, based on what helped me most. First, don't fear making mistakes. Mistakes are your best teachers. When you speak, focus on expressing your ideas rather than being perfect. Second, make English part of your daily life in small ways. Listen to English music, watch simple videos, or label things around your home in English. These small habits add up and make the language feel familiar. Third, Find people to speak with, whether friends, classmates, or online language partners. Speaking with real people builds your confidence like nothing else. Fourth, use simple words and sentences every day. You don't need complicated language to communicate well. Speaking regularly, even with basic words, will help you improve fast. And lastly, believe in yourself. Tell yourself that you are a speaker, a learner, and a doer. Confidence is a mindset, and when you believe in yourself, others will believe in you too. Remember, the journey to speaking English like a pro in 2025 is a journey you take step by step. Start today, speak your first word, and keep moving forward. Your voice matters, and with patience and practice, you will reach your goals. I'm cheering for you all the way.